In this section of our Creation Discovery Museum, we'd like to talk about the design of dinosaurs. We look at dinosaurs and we see design everywhere, just like we see in our human body. Now, right before you, you see a T-Rex skull. Now, this skull is a replica of what you've actually seen on site if you found a T-Rex skull. And so you would see that this big jaw, extending maybe over 5 feet, would be intimidating. I'm sure you would. T-Rex has a reputation for being intimidating. Now, you'll also see his fierce teeth. And he had 50 of these teeth. And you could see them layered. Some are broken. You could see that his whole skull is wide open. And we could see that if he had a skull that was completely solid with bone, he wouldn't be able to walk. He'd be hitting his head every time he walked. But it's designed, we believe God designed it so that he would have holes, so to say, in his head so he's able to walk. Now, it's interesting that when we look at this dinosaur, T-Rex, we find a lot of T-Rex teeth. Now, in Montana, in Glendive, where we dug for dinosaurs, we found a lot of remains of T-Rex, specifically his teeth. And we would find little pieces of teeth. We actually found little pieces of maybe a tooth and so on, edges of tooth. And we found a complete edge of a tooth about this big. It has serrations. T-Rex teeth has serrations like a steak knife. And so we found the serrations right here of this T-Rex tooth buried in the dig where we're digging. And right close by, we found the remnants of a turtle scoot. We found a little scoot from a turtle, part of a shell. And so here we are with a modern day marine turtle and an old 65 million year old T-Rex tooth. Does that present problems? It certainly does. Everywhere we dug on that mountain, as we were looking for dinosaurs in Glendive, we found modern fossils everywhere. So that is a problem with evolutionary thinking. Also, if we take a look, I'm going to use my imagination here, but I mean, if we take a look at the crevices in the brain, we know that the scripture says that there are certain creatures that actually breathe fire. Now, this might be kind of crazy, but if you think about it, there are a lot of animals, creatures in biology do amazing things. Think about the electric eel that can electrocute you. Think about the bioluminescent fly, little fly that actually has light. And then we think in terms of a bombardier beetle who can actually twist his bottom end and squirt a deadly poison to another insect approaching it. So we see marvelous things in biology. Why not think in terms of this kind of thing, a combustion reaction occurring in a dinosaur's head? Look at the crevices, the open space, lots of area so oxygen can go in and out and be breathed accordingly and produce combustion reactions, could produce fire. So we look at this specimen and we see God's design, we see a maker, and this portrays that there is a creator God. We're at the Dinosaur by Design section, and we're in the most famous part of our Creation Discovery Museum. Behind me is a dinosaur that I think most of you are familiar with. If you've seen the Jurassic Park series or Jurassic World, you know about him. Yes, he's a raptor. In the movies, they called him Velociraptor, but really, his name is really Deinonychus. That's the right kind of dinosaur we're talking about. Velociraptor was about 3 foot. This is about 5 to 6 foot. It makes him very intimidating. He's on a stand right now, so you can see him much better. If we had him down at the ground, he'd be right face to face with me. So yes, the movie was right when they made him terrifying because he must have been terrifying. Take a look at him. His name Deinonychus is because of his claw. It's called terrible claw. That's what the name signifies. If you take a look and you look at his mouth, you'll see that there are 50 teeth. These teeth are serrated, much like you would see a shark's tooth. I have a shark's tooth right here, and you can see that the shark tooth, this comes from a very large shark, has serrations. You can rub your hands and you get a cut. Well, guess what? he had the same kind of teeth. Just like T-Rex, they had serrated teeth that were sharp and could cut like a steak knife. Now, if you take a look, you'll also notice that one thing you remember in Jurassic Park, he jumped a lot. And that's what he has. He's got these unbelievable feet that are able to muscles and so on. Now, we never seen the muscles, but we got the idea that just by the way the anatomy is shaped, that we can actually see that this creature could have easily really been a jumper because of the way the leg anatomy is featured. Now, we've done a lot of research in raptors. There's a lot to be known about them. But one thing we'll tell you that what stands out with Deinonychus is this claw-like structure. He's got a claw that sticks up. So wherever he walked, he had a claw that stuck up. Now, that's really weird. It's very intimidating to find a dinosaur with a claw ready to go and ready to, do some hunting, because he was definitely a hunter. He could use that for his prey. He had these sickle-shaped claws that could easily take down other animals. And of course, his teeth would definitely be sort of a carnivore. It's believed that these kind of dinosaurs traveled in packs and had some degree of what we might say, I don't know, hunting intelligence. So we are marveled about this design as a creationist, looking at a creator. We see that, again, this is a design mechanism for this creature to exist. Now, we believe at one time that we didn't have these kind of creatures walking around, or this kind of thing, where it literally would go and eat other creatures. We know that beginning of creation, everything was good, and there was no death. And therefore, these kind of creatures and others could have maybe went to another diet. Anyway, as we look at it today, because of the fall, we know that sin enters the world, and because of sin, we have death, and because of sin and struggle, we know that one animal eats another animal, and this was definitely a cannibalistic kind of animal and a great hunter. So this is another testimony to God as a designer. We're in the dinosaur section, dinosaurs by design. And what I find very interesting about dinosaurs is that they have a very unusual matter of ways they look. For instance, let's take a look at the Triceratops. Triceratops had a frail, beautiful frail. It looked like a king or a queen walking around. Now, we have actually found parts of this frail. They're in our museum. Their bone structure is like this, and you can actually see it. You can see the structure and see it well. And you can see that this frail must have occupied some distance. It could occupy 3 to 4 feet around the head. Now, the Triceratops basically was a good-sized African elephant, maybe 12 feet high, and so on, maybe a little bigger. And it had this big frail. Also, to give you the size of Triceratops, we have its horns. So I'll pull out its horns to give you an idea of what it would look like. So here's the horns of Triceratops. Very impressive. And you can see that he could use them for defense too. So God gave this unbelievable design, the frail, and then also the horns to show that there is design in these creatures and a very big variability in the dinosaur kingdom. Now we also see, as we look at dinosaurs, we also see the fact that we have Stegosaurus. Now Stegosaurus, I kind of love, he had a small head, small brain size, but we know about brains. God creates brains to do what they need to do. So we believe that he was able to function in the dinosaur kingdom, and he basically had what he's known for is the plates on top of his back. Okay, so he had 24 of these plates, all 2 rows, very well designed. We don't know if they were armor or if they were to keep him cool, but there's some reason. What's another thing that's very interesting about Stegosaurus is his tail. His tail had spikes, and these spikes were intimidating. You could see them when you walk around. You could actually, you'd have to be careful because this Stegosaurus with his tail could wallop you pretty bad and could cause injury. So just be aware that Stegosaurus had these great big spikes on his tail, 4 of them. Now, along with Stegosaurus, by the way, talking about Stegosaurus, Stegosaurus has been found in a Buddhist temple. And they used to worship creatures like Stegosaurus and also Triceratops. The Babylonians worshipped Triceratops. Another dinosaur I'd like to show you is the Anglosaurus. Now the Anglosaurus is kind of an interesting creature because it had a tail that could do, it's like a hammer tail. And so if you came close to it, it could hammer you. So look at the design. We went from a frail to plates in the back, and now we got a hammer as a tail. And so this is a unique design. So let me show you, we actually have one of the ends of the tail. And there it is. So you can see the tail goes this way. There's one end. Another end would go the opposite way, and you would literally be able to swing this back and forth. By the way, this is heavy. This is petrified stone. So it's petrified bone, but it's made of stone. So it becomes heavy. Inside, you can see the bone marrow. So we have definitely a beautiful specimen here. Along with the Broccosaurus, the Anglosaurus, we have its outside, which is really very significantly designed. It had a outside plate. And here's the outside plate. The outside plates, they actually moved left and right. They moved up and down, and they would be used for protection. So, you could see that this outside plate had a point to it. So it makes a good defense also. So this kind of was an armored guy walking around with a set of armor all around him. So we see this unbelievable design that God literally has created with all these dinosaurs. And I give him the glory because he's an amazing creator. We are at the Dinosaur by Design section of the Creation Discovery Museum. In this section, we have many different dinosaurs, and one of the dinosaurs we're looking at is the Behemoth. The Behemoth, or we might call it the Broccosaurus. The Broccosaurus is a very large animal. It is a sauropod dinosaur. It extended 4 stories tall. That's at least 40 feet. And so when you look at this dinosaur, it was big. We know that it left its footprints everywhere. The largest creature that we have that we can see today is a giraffe. A giraffe eats about 100 pounds of food a day. Imagine what this guy could have eaten, twice the size of a giraffe. 200, 300 pounds of food a day of vegetation. So we know that the environment had to be different. But we have bones of these giant sauropods, and the Broccosaurus in particular, the one I have in my hand. We know that it had nostrils on its head. It probably was able to go in a river. So we look at this dinosaur and see that it's fantastically designed because it had to, look at its long neck, it had to pump blood all the way up its neck. Not only that, the neck had to move. So we know the giraffe had a 25-pound size heart. Imagine the size of this guy's heart. It must have been big. We don't have any fossils of hearts, but we can just study by the anatomy, the bone anatomy, that this had to be a huge heart. We also see that the design of the neck had to be like a crane, like we see outside. Lots of space in between the areas, vertebrae going up and down, and being agile enough to be able to move up and down. It had a special circulatory system, just like the giraffe. Whenever a giraffe bends down, all the blood goes down. Be very harmful. But because of the way the heart's designed and the circulatory system is designed, there's no problem. So again, we see a work of design. Now another interesting feature, as we look at this model over here, is that the Bible talks about the Behemoth. It says the Broccosaurus, big dinosaur sauropods. It says that in Job chapter 40, verse 15, it says, "Behold the Behemoth, which I created along with thee." With who? With man. It's another reason why we believe dinosaurs were contemporary to man. Because God said it. He said he created the Behemoth along with man. And he says he eats like an ox. He eats grass like an ox. So we know he was a vegetarian. And guess what? Sauropods, big dinosaurs, were vegetarians. They ate a lot of leaves, grass, and so on because they had to, for their existence. Most large animals, vegetarian, use that kind of mechanism. They have to use plants to be able to move about and support their big metabolism. Another feature is that we know that this dinosaur can move. In Jurassic Park, they illustrated this movement with Broccosaurus. They actually had Broccosaurus standing on its hind legs. Now it's interesting. How does a big four-story dinosaur stand on its hind legs? Well, the only way is because it would have hollow bones. The scripture talks about that. Scripture in chapter 40 in Job, it speaks about hollow bones. It speaks about bones structured of bronze. It speaks about bones that were designed, and it also speaks about his stomach muscles and stomach, how muscular the stomach must have been. So when we saw the picture of Jurassic Park, the dinosaur standing on its hind legs, I think of this guy standing on his hind legs, just like Jurassic Park. I think of the Behemoth in Job 40 standing on its hind legs on full display for Job to see. 40-foot dinosaur standing on its hind legs. Imagine how big that would have been. And facing him is his belly and his groin area, which the Bible speaks about specifically. And more importantly, they say in the Bible that this dinosaur, Behemoth, chapter 40, is chief amongst God's ways, meaning that this is one of the best designs God is sharing or showing off to Job to be able to see his wonderful creation as a creator. This is a great testimony to a creator God. We thank you for being with us as we went through the many, many different parts of our museum, but there's much more to see, and we'd like to invite you to join us in the future as we have time to be able to explain everything to you, every little thing. We have a lot of things to talk about, and we just looking forward to seeing you in the near future.
The secular scientists tell you by the media and in the public school system that they can explain these dinosaurs. In fact, they can seem to be able to explain everything. But when you look at dinosaurs, there's a lot of things, and when you look at them in the rocks, you find a lot of things they can't explain, which should make you question their whole paradigm. And I'm going to talk about 4 evolutionary challenges. If I have time, I'll mention one challenge we have that I think I have a good solution for. But there's polar dinosaurs, dinosaurs soft tissue, and the extinction of dinosaurs. Those are challenges for them. And speaking of polar dinosaurs, here's the northern hemisphere, and I label it either by tracks or by a dinosaur. And you can see at high latitude, Spitsbergen, we have tracks, and southeast Greenland, we have dinosaurs. By the way, more have been added to this since I had this plotted up quite a long time ago. We have in Siberia, then in Alaska, even in Southwest Alaska, Canada, the Queen Elizabeth Islands. And then for the southern hemisphere, assuming plate tectonics, the Arctic Circle would include Southeast Australia and New Zealand and the Chatham Islands, where you all find dinosaur fossils. But those are in the tropical areas now. So regardless of whether we bring plate tectonics into it or not, there are dinosaurs on Antarctica in at least 2 places. Dinosaurs on Antarctica. So we have polar dinosaurs. So this brings up the problem of what are they doing up there? What would they eat? A lot of mysteries. Some quotes. Michael Benton said, "Should we now imagine dinosaurs as thermally insulated, warm-blooded animals that plowed through snowdrifts and scraped the ice off the ground to find food?" That is a lot different than they used to think. Here's another quote from Dinosaurs of Darkness. "The picture dinosaurs that were active in a country with permafrost and that consequently experienced winter temperatures which only a few mammals tolerate today is a very different one than the one popular perception of all dinosaurs as denizens of steaming tropical swamps." So how do they explain those things? There's even another one. Even if polar dinosaurs were able to subsist on poor quality food for some time, a photosynthetic crisis of some duration would have been fatal to them because even this food resource would have become exhausted. So you have a huge question of what would they eat? How would they survive? And not only that, when they supposedly died out 65 million years ago from a meteorite impact on the Yucatan Peninsula, one of the ideas is that we had impact winter. We had instant winter due to the reflection of the sunlight from all those particles from the meteorite up in the stratosphere, and that would have killed them off. But the question is, if they can survive, if they survived in the polar areas already, well, this wouldn't bother them either. So it just another many conundrums that they have. And desert dinosaurs, yes, they find a lot of tracks in deserts. And you got to ask yourself, what do they eat? In fact, in the western United States, they claim a lot of the sandstones, like the Coconino sandstone, were ancient deserts like the Sahara Desert. And in a lot of these desert areas, you find tracks of dinosaurs. Most of them are carnivorous, three-toed dinosaurs. So the question is, they occur on the top in this area, the Middle Jurassic Entrada Formation. The main body of this formation represents an ancient sand sea of the type associated with the Sahara Desert today. What are they doing in a desert? Does that make sense? Maybe these aren't desert sands. That's the upshot of all this. Regardless, they have a problem explaining all this. And this is a picture of the Wankel T-Rex. That is mostly unfossilized. It's now in the Smithsonian Museum on lend from the Museum of the Rockies here in Bozeman, Montana. And it was generally, like I said, unpermineralized, unfossilized. And notice its neck going around like this. You commonly find dinosaurs. In fact, Tom showed one where their heads bent back, their tails bent, their limbs are bent at the elbows. This is a sign of asphyxiation. Many dinosaurs asphyxiated somehow by water or by volcanic ash or something like that. And they find in this dinosaur, the Wankel T-Rex, they not only find soft tissues, they find blood vessels, and they find round red things or red colored things that appear to be red blood cells. And this was on display in the walls of the Museum of the Rockies for many years, where it shows it. You got to ask the question, how could these features be that old and still be unfossilized? Anyway, Mary Schweitzer, who got her PhD from Montana State University here in Bozeman, did research on this. And she discovered the soft tissue in dinosaurs. Traditionally, there was little hope that biomolecules might be recovered from bone more than a few thousand years old. It should decay in a few thousand years. That's what she said originally. But when they found the soft tissue, she says, it was totally shocking. I didn't believe it. That is the finding of likely red blood cells until we'd done it 17 times. Soft tissue is a major challenge. It can't last for more than a couple thousand years, and yet they're 65 million years to 230 million years old. That's when dinosaurs supposedly lived in the uniformitarian time scale. Now, the fourth problem they have is, why did they go extinct? They were global, worldwide, at the poles, everywhere, small, large, well adapted. So why should they go extinct? Well, here's a quote. By far the most baffling major question about dinosaurs is what caused their extinction? And of course, you've heard there's many extinction theories, like brains were too small, like that Stegosaurus that Tom showed has the brain the size of a walnut. Couldn't compete with the mammals, other animals ate their eggs, chronic constipation, cosmic rays from a supernova, drastic changes in the climate. There's about over 100 of them, 100 theories. And I'm going to skip the funny cartoons. Anyway, they don't know why they're extinct. Frank de Courton in the book Dinosaurs of Utah says each can find at least some support in the geological and paleontological data that can be brought to bear on the issue. But the fact of the matter is that even now, at the end of the 20th century, there is no single explanation for the demise of the dinosaurs that is universally accepted by even a simple majority of scientists. Even the meteorite impact idea has lots of problems, and is not. It's probably a majority accepted, but there's a large minority that don't accept it. So they have a lot of challenges, despite them claiming that we can explain all this stuff. We have our own challenges. Well, first of all, it's pretty easy to explain why you have these dinosaur graveyards and dinosaur fossils, because the flood buried them. But we have other challenging data to explain, like dinosaur tracks, dinosaur eggs, and scavenged bone beds. See, we find some of those broken off teeth from T-Rexes in the bone beds, but not the rest of the skeleton, meaning that the bones sat on the surface for a while and T-Rex was eating on them, broke his teeth, so he scavenged them. So this indicates a lot of time. And here's a quote from a website that no longer exists. He challenged us, saying, features like these, termite nests, dinosaur tracks, cicada burrows, and channels are not easily explained by the white young Earth creations. They don't show their followers this type of data, and they have not explained it. Well, I like to correct this, in that I had an explanation out on this in the mid-1990s. It's called the beds hypothesis, which I'll talk about. And we don't hide these things from our followers. And some of these other features, burrows and so forth, can be explained also by this beds model. Anyway, the challenge of dinosaur tracks in a flood has challenged a lot of people, and a lot of them have lost their faith that they had it. Here's one that was reported in Science. By day, quarrying through the thin layers of rock, we started to come across footprints of terrestrial animals, says Godfrey. You can't imagine a global flood and animals finding ground to make footprints on. That, more than anything, any other experience in my life, really shook me to the core. So a lot of people have been challenged by this. So I spent some time trying to figure it out. Anyway, here is a sample. Here's a dinosaur track from northeast Wyoming. There's one from a coal mine in Utah. See, you find dinosaur tracks on the top of coal mines, the top. And that can all be fit into this beds model, which I don't have time to go into. But here's a quick worldwide distribution in about, year 2000 of areas of footprints. But this map is probably can triple the number that have been found since then. Tracks are global. They need to be explained. And eggs, first one's found in Mongolia, and then in Montana, and now they find them globally. And this is an old site. You can multiply this by 2 or 3 times now. And here's a dinosaur bone from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in north central Montana, showing the teeth marks of a carnivorous dinosaur. And there is one of the teeth that we find in bone beds. Anyway, this is what I do when I'm challenged on any research project. I examine everything carefully, hold fast that which is good. I hold fast the Bible is God's word, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, but I examine everything carefully. I can't emphasize more that word carefully, because if you don't do enough research, you might know enough just to get in trouble. You got to dig deep into these things. And when I did this, I'm going to skip some of these, I found possible solutions to it. Anyway, we can place them as early in the flood, because where we find dinosaurs, we have evidence that there are thousands of feet of sedimentary strata. They seem to be where there's lots of strata. And also we have evidence of thousands of feet of sedimentary rocks that was eroded from the area down to the level where we find the dinosaurs. So this is evidence of an early flood. They died early in the flood. They made the tracks. So what are tracks doing early in the flood? Laying eggs, scavenging. How could that happen? Well, here's kind of a schematic. The current continental sedimentary rocks, 6,000 feet worth. 2,000 extra feet at day 150, the peak of the flood, eroded off down to the level of the dinosaurs. That's kind of a schematic. I'm going to skip that. When you look at the dinosaur features, there's a lot of unusual features. In fact, I'm just going to focus in on the unusual track features and skip the other ones for saving time. I discovered that the tracks of likely poor swimmers are rare. In other words, they couldn't probably flee from the catastrophe of the flood. That's why we don't find their tracks. For instance, Triceratops with that heavy head, it's not going to be able to swim very well. Also, we don't find the tracks of young juveniles and babies. And when we find tracks in Africa that are buried, a lot of them are from young ones. So the fact that you only find adults and older juveniles indicates something unusual. Maybe the youngsters weren't able to survive the initial onslaught of the flood, and the others could flee for a while. Also, as Tom mentioned, they're practically always straight. You know, I'm a hunter and I hunt in the snow that we have out here right now. And, you know, I follow elk and they move all over the area. But when I spook them up, oh no, then they move in a straight line. So there's something unusual with this. Also, the tracks are practically always on a straight, flat bedding plane. They do not seem to have hills, you know. And then we have tracks, Tom mentioned this, on different layers of the same types of tracks, like in Northeast Wyoming in one location. There's the same tracks on 2 layers, separated by strata they believe is 3 million years difference. Same dinosaurs. How probable is that? Well, that indicates that 3 million years doesn't exist. So how do we explain these things? Well, I developed a hypothesis called beds, briefly exposed alluvial sediment, to explain this powerful challenge to creation science. Sea level would oscillate during the flood. There'd be local drops and local rises. And so where you have rapid sedimentation, you'd shallow it out. Here's a block diagram showing that. Rapid sedimentation, time T1, time T2, it deposit. In time T3, it reaches close to the surface. Then the oscillating floodwaters, a drop could expose it. By the way, this is a block diagram that might represent an area 100 miles wide. And you would expose the sediments, and dinosaurs swimming nearby or from higher land could embark on this exposed bedding from the local drop in the floodwaters, make tracks, lay eggs, scavenge dead dinosaurs they find, but then it rises again and covers up all this material, these evidences, to preserve all this stuff rapidly in the rock record. And it continues to where you have thousands more feet piled on, and then it's eroded off to where we see it today. So that's the main challenge for us, and I think I have a good model. You can read about it in the book Dinosaur Challenges and Mysteries. So that's all I have on dinosaurs at the moment.